bombardment of Japan and for direct land-based air support of the invasion of Kyushu. The islands could also allow for tightening the blockade of Japanese shipping and be used as a staging area and supply base for Army invasion of the home islands. 190. The Japanese troops defending Okinawa, under the command of Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ashijima, totaled some 75,100,000, augmented by thousands of civilians. American forces' fourth operation totaled 183,000 troops in 7 divisions, 4 U.S. Army and 3 Marine, under the 10th Army. 191. The British Pacific Fleet operated as a separate unit. Its objective was to strike airfields on the chain of islands between Formosa and Okinawa, to prevent the Japanese reinforcing Okinawa. After an intense 7-day bombardment, the main landings on Okinawa took place on the 1st of April, 1945, on the Higashi beaches off island's west coast. 192. However, there was little opposition at the beaches as the Japanese had decided to meet the Americans farther inland out of range of naval gunfire. About 60,000 American troops landed on the first day, seizing the 2 nearby airfields and pushing across the narrow waist of the island. The first major Japanese counterattack occurred on the 6th and the 7th of April, in the form of attacks by kamikaze aircraft and a naval operation, called Tengo. Under the command of Admiral Stachiit, the battleship Yamato, the light cruiser Yohei and 8 destroyers were assembled as bait to draw away as many American carrier aircraft as possible, in order to leave Allied naval forces vulnerable to large scale kamikaze attacks. As a consequence of Japanese fuel shortages, the Yamato had only enough to reach Okinawa. Off Okinawa, it was planned to beach the battleship and use her 18.1-inch, 46 centimeters, guns to support fighting on the island. 193. After being sighted by an American submarine and reconnaissance aircraft, naval attack aircraft sunk the Yamato, Yohei and 4 of the destroyers. 194. Mass kamikaze attacks intensified during the following 3 months, with 5,500 sorties being flown by the Japanese. 195. In the northern part of Okinawa, American troops only met light opposition, and the area was seized within about 2 weeks. However, the main Japanese defenses were in the south. There was bitter fighting against well-entrenched Japanese troops, but U.S. forces slowly made progress. The seizure of Shuri Castle, the center of Japanese resistance, on the 29th of May represented both a strategic and psychological blow. 196. Organized resistance was not over until 21 June. Winking sad smiley. 197. Many Japanese went into hiding and the campaign was not declared over until 2 July. The battle for Okinawa proved costly and lasted much longer than the Americans had expected. The Japanese skillfully utilized terrain to inflict maximum casualties. 198. Total American casualties were 49,451. Including 12,520 dead or missing and 36,631 wounded. 199. Japanese casualties were approximately 110,000 killed, and 7,400 taken prisoner. 199. 94% of the Japanese soldiers died along with many civilians. 200. Kamikaze attacks also sunk 36 ships, damaged 368 more and killed 4,900 U.S. sailors for the loss of 7,800 Japanese aircraft. 201. China, 1945. After Japanese victories in Operation Ichigo, Japan was losing the battle in Burma and facing constant attacks from Chinese nationalist forces and communist guerrillas in the countryside. The IJA began preparations for the Battle of West Hunan in March 1945, mobilizing 80,000 men to seize Chinese airfields and secure railroads in West Hunan by early April. 202. In response, the Chinese National Military Council dispatched the 4th Front Army and the 10th and 27th Army Groups with He Yingqin as Commander-in-Chief. 203. At the same time, it airlifted the entire Chinese new 6th Corps, an American-equipped corps and veterans of the Burma Expeditionary Force, from Kunming to Jijian. 202. Chinese forces totaled 110,000 men, supported by about 400 aircraft from Chinese and American air forces. 204. Chinese forces won decisively and launched a large counterattack in this campaign. Concurrently, the Chinese repelled a Japanese offensive in Henan and Hubei. 203. Afterwards, Chinese forces retook Hunan and Hubei in South China. Chinese launched a counter-offensive to retake Guangxi, which was the last major Japanese stronghold in South China. In August 1945, Chinese forces retook Guangxi. Borneo, 1945. US LVTs land Australian soldiers at Balikpapan on the 7th of July 1945. The Borneo Campaign of 1945 was the last major campaign in the Southwest Pacific area. In a series of amphibious assaults between 1 May and the 21st of July, the Australian I Corps, under General Leslie Moore's head, attacked Japanese forces occupying the island. Allied naval and air forces, centered on the U.S. 7th Fleet under Admiral Thomas Kinkaid, the Australian 1st Tactical Air Force and the U.S. 13th Air Force also played important roles in the campaign. The campaign opened with a landing on the small island of Tarakan on the 1st of May. This was followed on the 1st of June by simultaneous assaults in the northwest, on the island of Labuan and the coast of Brunei. Week later, the Australians attacked Japanese positions in North Borneo. The attention of the Allies then switched back to the central east coast, with the last major amphibious assault of World War II, at Balikpapan on 1 July. Although the campaign was criticized in Australia as a waste of the lives of soldiers, it achieved a number of objectives, such as increasing the isolation of significant Japanese forces occupying the Dutch East Indies, capturing major oil supplies and freeing Allied prisoners of war, who were being held in deteriorating conditions. 205. At one of the very worst sites, around Sandakan in Borneo, only 6 of 2,500 British and Australian prisoners survived. 180. Landings in the Japanese home islands, 1945. American B-29 superfortresses drop incendiary bombs over the port city of Kobe. June 1945. Hard-fought battles on the Japanese islands of Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and others resulted in horrific casualties on both sides but finally produced a Japanese defeat. Of the 117,000 Okinawan and Japanese troops defending Okinawa, 94% died. 175. Faced with the loss of most of their experienced pilots, the Japanese increased their use of kamikaze tactics in an attempt to create unacceptably high casualties for the Allies. The U.S. Navy proposed to force a Japanese surrender through a total naval blockade and air raids. 206. Many military historians believe that the Okinawa campaign led directly to the atomic bombings as a means of avoiding the ground invasion of Japan. This view is explained by Victor Davis Hansen because the Japanese on Okinawa were so fierce in their defense, even when cut off, and without supplies, And because casualties were so appalling, many American strategists looked for an alternative means to subdue mainland Japan, other than a direct invasion. This means presented itself with the advent of atomic bombs, which worked admirably in convincing the Japanese to sue for peace, unconditionally, without American casualties. 207. Towards the end of the war, as strategic bombing became more important, a new command for the United States Strategic Air Forces in the Pacific was created to oversee all U.S. strategic bombing in the hemisphere under United States Army Air Forces General Curtis LeMay. Japanese industrial production plunged as nearly half of the built-up areas of 67 cities were destroyed by B-29 firebombing raids. On 9-10 March 1945, LeMay oversaw Operation Meeting House, in which 300 B-29s dropped 1,665 tons of bombs, mostly napalm-carrying M69 incendiary bombs, on the Japanese capital. 208. This attack is seen the most destructive bombing raid in history and killed between 80,000 and 100,000 people in a single night, destroying over 270,000 buildings and leaving over 1 million homeless. 208. In the 10 days that followed, almost 10,000 bombs were dropped, destroying 31% of Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka and Kobe. LeMay also oversaw Operation Starvation, in which the inland waterways of Japan were extensively mined by air, which disrupted the little remaining Japanese coastal sea traffic. On the 26th of July, 1945, U.S. President Harry S. Truman, the chairman of the nationalist government of China Chiang Kai-shek, and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill issued the Potsdam Declaration, which outlined the terms of surrender for Japan as agreed upon at the Potsdam Conference. This ultimatum stated that, if Japan did not surrender, it would face prompt and utter destruction. 209. Atomic bombs. The mushroom cloud from nuclear explosion over Nagasaki on the 6th of August, 1945. The U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima in the first nuclear attack in history. In a press release issued after the bombing, President Harry S. Truman warned Japan to surrender or expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. 210. On the 9th of August, the U.S. dropped another atomic bomb on Nagasaki. More than 240,000 people died as a direct result of these two bombings. 211. The necessity of the atomic bombings has long been debated, with detractors claiming that a naval blockade and incendiary bombing campaign had already made invasion, hence the atomic bomb unnecessary. 212. However, other scholars have argued that the atomic bombings shocked the Japanese government into surrender and helped avoid Operation Downfall, or a prolonged blockade and conventional bombing campaign, any of which would have exacted much higher casualties among Japanese civilians. 211. Historian Richard B. Frank wrote that a Soviet invasion of Japan was never likely because they had insufficient naval capability. 213. Soviet entry. Pacific Fleet Marines of the Soviet Navy hoist the Soviet naval ensign in Port Arthur, on the 1st of October 1945. In February 1945, during the Yalta Conference, the Soviet Union had agreed to enter the war against Japan 90 days after the surrender of Germany. 214. At the time, Soviet participation was seen as crucial to tie down the large number of Japanese forces in Manchuria and Korea, keeping them from being transferred to the home islands to mount a defense to an invasion. 214. On the 9th of August, exactly on schedule, the Soviet Union entered Thea by invading Manchuria. A battle-hardened, 1 million-strong Soviet force, transferred from Europe, 215, attacked Japanese forces and landed a heavy blow against the Japanese canned gun, Kwantung Army. 216. The Machian strategic offensive operation began on 9 August 1945, with the Soviet invasion of the Japanese puppet state of Manchukuo. This was the last campaign of Second World War and the largest of the 1945 Soviet-Japanese War, which resumed hostilities between USSR and Japan after almost 6 years of peace. Soviet gains on the continent were Manchukuo